There's a luxury apartment building in San Francisco that cost hundreds of millions to build. Millennium Tower, 58 stories with a beautiful glass facade in a premium location with units selling for millions. And it's sinking. Not metaphorically, actually sinking, tilting. The building has settled more than 16 inches since it opened. The tilt is visible. You can measure it. The problem? The foundation. They built it on shallow pilings, friction pilings that sit in sand and clay. They didn't go deep enough. They didn't anchor to bedrock. So this gorgeous, expensive, impressive structure is slowly collapsing into the earth beneath it. When you see a building like that from the outside, it looks solid. It looks successful, like someone knew what they were doing. But you can't see what's underneath, and what's underneath determines whether everything above it will stand. I see this all the time in business. Beautiful brand, impressive marketing, slick website, growing revenue. And then, seemingly overnight, it collapses. Because the foundation was never solid. I'm Jason Hager, and this is Grayleaf Media. Today, what you build on matters as much as what you build. Here's something nobody tells you about building a business. The taller you want to build, the deeper you have to dig first. Back to our analogy, if you're building a garden shed, you can get away with a shallow foundation, maybe just some concrete pads. You're not really putting much weight on them. But if you're building a skyscraper, you're digging down 30, 40, sometimes 70 feet, working for months before you ever lay the first brick anyone will ever see. That's a lot of time, massive expense, heavy machinery with crews working underground in mud and rock. And nobody sees it. Nobody celebrates it. There's no ribbon-cutting ceremony for a hole in the ground. This is why foundation work is so hard to justify. It's invisible, it's slow, it's expensive, and it produces nothing you can show off. Meanwhile, your competitors are already 5 stories up. They're posting photos on LinkedIn. They're celebrating growth. They look successful. And you are still digging. But here's what you know that they might not. What goes under the surface determines whether what goes above it will stand. In business, your foundation is your core identity. It's your values, your why, the reason you exist beyond making money. It's who you serve and why you serve them. It's what you stand for and what you stand against. It's the principles you won't compromise, even when it costs you. Most businesses skip this work. They see an opportunity in the market and they start building immediately. They want to get to market fast, and they want to start generating revenue. They want something to show. And that's fine if you're building something small, a side hustle or a lifestyle business, something meant to be modest. But if you want to build something significant, something that lasts, something that can weather storms and support growth, well, first you have to dig. I've watched companies chase trends without a foundation. They pivot constantly. They react to every market shift. They adopt whatever strategy seems to be working for someone else. And they wonder why nothing sticks, why customers don't stay, why employees don't believe, and why growth feels chaotic. It's because there's no bedrock underneath any of it. They're building on sand. Compare that to companies with clear core foundations, like Patagonia. We exist to save the planet. Everything else flows from that. They make decisions that cost them revenue in the short term because their foundation is clear. They'll tell you not to buy their jacket if you don't need it. They'll shut down on Black Friday. They'll sue the government. That's not random. That's a foundation at work. Or REI, a cooperative owned by members committed to outdoor stewardship. They close on Black Friday too. They pay employees to go outside instead of selling stuff. They invest millions in trail maintenance and conservation. Again, not random. Foundation. When you have a foundation, decisions get easier. You don't have to debate every choice from scratch. You ask, does this align with our foundation? Yes or no? When you don't have a foundation, every decision is agonizing because you have no bedrock to stand on. So, what actually goes into a foundation? In construction, it's concrete and rebar, steel pilings anchored to bedrock, materials chosen for their ability to bear weight without shifting. In business, it's something similar, but less tangible. First, your core values. And I don't mean the ones on your website that you workshopped in a team meeting and then forgot about. I mean the load-bearing beliefs, the ones you actually operate from, even when nobody's looking. The beliefs that, if violated, would make you quit, would make you walk away from a contract, would make you turn down revenue. Here's the test. Would you hold to this value if it cost you money? If the answer is no, it's not a core value. It's a preference. It's wallpaper. Core values are non-negotiable. They're the things that define who you are, even when, especially when, they're inconvenient. Second, your why. Why does this business exist at all? And to make money isn't an answer. That's like saying a building exists to occupy space. True, but not useful. Your why is the reason you chose this business, this market, this problem to solve. It's the thing that gets you out of bed when the business is hard. It's the story you tell when someone asks, why this? For me, it's this. I believe small businesses with a mission deserve the same strategic clarity that Fortune 500 companies pay millions for. That's why Grayleaf Media exists. That's my foundation. When I'm deciding whether to take on a client, I ask, does this align with that? Will this work help a mission-driven business get clarity? If yes, we move forward. If no, I don't care how much they're offering to pay. That's a foundation at work. Third, who you serve and why you serve them. This gets specific. Not small businesses, not entrepreneurs, or people who need marketing. Who specifically are you here for, and why them? The answer to this question determines who you say yes to and who you say no to. It determines your messaging, your positioning, your pricing, and your entire go-to-market strategy. If you don't have clarity here, you'll chase anyone with a budget, and you'll build a business that doesn't stand for anything. Fourth, what you stand for and what you stand against. This one makes people uncomfortable, because if you stand for something, you're implicitly standing against something else. And that means you'll alienate people. You'll make some people mad, and you'll lose potential customers. Good. A foundation that tries to please everyone isn't a foundation. It's quicksand. I stand for profit and purpose. I believe you can make money while making a difference. I believe mission-driven businesses deserve to thrive financially. That means I stand against the idea that you have to choose, against the martyr complex, against the notion that doing good means struggling financially. Some people disagree with that. Some people think profit is inherently dirty. Some people think mission-driven businesses should operate only as nonprofits. Well, those people aren't my clients, and that's okay. My foundation repels them. It's supposed to. All of this, values, why, who you serve, what you stand for, this is what goes in the foundation. And here's the final test. If everything else was stripped away, what would remain? If you lost your biggest client, if your product became obsolete, if you had to start over tomorrow, what would still be true about who you are and what you believe? That is your foundation. Let's talk about what happens when you don't do this work. When you skip the foundation and just start building. At first, it looks like you made the right call. You're moving fast. You're launching products, you're getting traction, and revenue is coming in. Meanwhile, your competitor who's still doing foundation work looks slow. They're overthinking. They're stuck in analysis paralysis. You are winning. And then something shifts. Maybe it's a decision you have to make, an opportunity that doesn't quite fit, or a client who wants something you're not sure you should deliver. And you don't have a foundation to stand on. So you ask your team, what should we do? And everyone has a different answer. Because there's no shared bedrock, no core identity to reference. The debate can go in circles. It can take hours, days, sometimes weeks to make a decision that should have been obvious. Or maybe a customer gets upset. They expected one thing, you delivered another. And when you try to figure out where the disconnect happened, you realize you never actually defined what you stand for. Your marketing said one thing, your sales team said another, your product delivered something else entirely, because there was no foundation holding it all together. Or maybe you hire someone. They seem great, smart, experienced, capable, but 6 months in, they're frustrated. They don't understand why you make the decisions you make. They think you're being illogical, leaving money on the table. And you can't explain it to them because you don't have the language for your foundation. It's just a feeling, an instinct. So they leave, and you hire someone else. The cycle repeats. Here's what's happening in all these scenarios. Trying to build high without building deep. And every time you add weight to the structure, a new product, a new hire, a new market, a new strategy, the foundation shifts, because it was never anchored to anything solid. I've seen businesses that look incredibly successful from the outside. I'm sure you've seen it too. 7 figures in revenue, growing team, press coverage, industry recognition. And the founder is miserable. Because they built something hollow, something that doesn't actually align with who they are or what they care about. They were so focused on building up that they never stopped to ask what they were building on. And here's the really important hard part. Once you've built high without a foundation, going back to dig one is incredibly difficult. It means pausing. It means turning down opportunities while you do the work. It means potentially dismantling things you've already built. It's like trying to excavate under a building that people are living in. Not impossible, but really, really hard. So here's the uncomfortable truth. You can build fast, or you can build on solid ground. Rarely both. The businesses that rush to market without a foundation might win in year 1, maybe even year 3. But by year 5, year 10, they're either rebuilding from scratch or they're sinking. The ones who took time to dig deep, well, they're just getting started. Now let's talk about something that makes all of this even more complicated. Foundations don't just sit on concrete. They sit on soil, on earth, on ground that shifts. In construction, you have to account for this. Soil settles. Water tables rise and fall. Earthquakes happen. Ground freezes and thaws, depending on where you live. Even the best foundation can fail if the ground underneath it changes. In business, the ground is the market. Consumer behavior, technology, economic conditions, regulatory environment, cultural shifts. All of it moving all the time. And sometimes that ground shifts so dramatically that even a solid foundation isn't enough. Think about Blockbuster. Their foundation was actually solid. Customer service, convenience, selection, community. Those were real values. They built something people loved. But the ground shifted. Streaming technology emerged. Consumer behavior changed. People stopped wanting to drive to a store. And Blockbuster's foundation, built for a world of physical media, couldn't adapt. The foundation was solid, but it was built for ground that no longer existed. Or Kodak. They literally invented digital photography. They had the technology. They had the talent. But their foundation was built on selling film. Their entire identity, their business model, their culture, all anchored to film. When the market moved to digital, their foundation became a liability. So here's the hard question. Even if a solid foundation can fail when the ground shifts, is there a point to building one? The answer is this. A business with no foundation just blows wherever the wind goes. No identity, no consistency, no core. They chase every trend. They pivot constantly. They have no idea who they are. A business with a rigid foundation cracks when the ground shifts. They know who they are, but they can't adapt. They hold on to an identity that's no longer relevant. They die defending territory that doesn't matter anymore. But a business with a strong, adaptable foundation, they can sense the shifting ground and respond. Here's the key. Your core why might stay the same, but how you deliver it must evolve. Netflix understood this. Their foundation, convenient entertainment at home. First, that meant mailing DVDs, then streaming, then producing original content, then global distribution. The how changed completely. The why stayed the same. Adobe did this too. Their foundation, empowering creative professionals. First, that meant selling boxed software, then subscriptions, then cloud collaboration, then AI-powered tools. The delivery method evolved. The mission didn't. So yes, the ground shifts. Markets change, technology disrupts, and consumer behavior evolves. And sometimes that means your foundation needs to be reimagined. Not abandoned, reimagined. This is terrifying, by the way. It means looking at something you've built your entire business on and asking, is this still the right foundation for the world we're in now? It means potentially tearing down and rebuilding while the structure is still standing. It means doing foundation work on a building people are living in. But here's what I've learned. Businesses with solid foundations survive market shifts by reimagining how they serve their why. Businesses with weak foundations collapse at the first tremor because they don't know what to hold on to. And businesses with no foundation? Well, they disappeared before the ground even started moving. So you can do everything right and still face a market that shifts underneath you. But a strong foundation gives you the stability to adapt rather than just react. It gives you something to stand on when you figure out what comes next. There's one more thing I want to talk about. If you've ever built anything in a cold climate, you know about frost lines. The frost line is how deep the ground freezes in winter. And it matters, because when ground freezes and thaws, it expands and contracts. That movement can easily crack a foundation. So in cold climates, you have to build your foundation below the frost line, deep enough that the freeze-thaw cycle can't touch it. How deep you need to go depends on your climate. Florida, you barely need to dig. The ground doesn't freeze. Minnesota, you're going down 4 feet minimum, because winters are brutal. In business, this translates to how volatile is your market. If you're in a stable, predictable industry, you might not need as deep a foundation. The climate is mild. But if you're in a volatile market, like tech, media, retail, or anything subject to rapid disruption, you need to build deeper. Because winter is coming. It always does. Economic recessions, industry disruptions, competitive threats, regulatory changes, these are the winters of business. And if your foundation isn't deep enough, the freeze-thaw cycle will crack it. But there's more to winterizing than just depth. You also need insulation. In construction, insulation protects your foundation from temperature swings. It creates buffer zones and reduces the impact of external change. In business, insulation looks like diversification. Multiple revenue streams, multiple customer segments, multiple product lines. Not because you're unfocused, but because you're protecting your foundation from single points of failure. If you have one client who represents 60% of your revenue, your foundation is vulnerable. If they leave, you crack. If you have one product that generates all your income, your foundation is exposed. If demand shifts, you're in trouble. Insulation means building layers of protection around your core. This also looks like cash reserves. Cash is thermal mass. It keeps you warm when revenue freezes. Businesses that operate on razor-thin margins with no reserves are like houses with no insulation. The first cold snap kills the will or capacity to continue. It looks like strategic partnerships, relationships that can help you weather storms, people who will take your call when things get hard. That's insulation too. And here's what's crucial. You insulate before winter comes, not during the blizzard. When business is good, when revenue is flowing, when the market is hot, that's when you build your reserves. That's when you diversify. That's when you strengthen partnerships. Because trying to winterize during a downturn is almost impossible. I see it often. Businesses that thrive in fair weather but collapse the moment conditions change. They built for summer. They assumed summer would last forever. And then winter came. The businesses that survive long-term are the ones who build for winter even when the sun is shining. They go deep. They insulate. They prepare. And when the freeze comes, they're ready. Some businesses even thrive in winter because they built different revenue streams that activate in different conditions. Summer products and winter products. Boom services and recession services. They don't just survive the cold. They use it. Winter forces creativity. When resources are limited, when markets contract and things get hard, you find new ways to deliver value. But you can only do that if your foundation is deep enough and insulated enough to keep you alive while you innovate. So here's what I want you to think about this week. What's your foundation made of? Have you done the deep work? Or did you just start building? Is the ground underneath you stable? If the market changed tomorrow, would your foundation crack? Could you adapt? And have you winterized? Have you built deep enough for your climate? Have you insulated against the inevitable cold? What's the difference between your core identity, the things that should never change, and your delivery method, the things that must evolve? You may not have all the answers. I'm just asking you to sit with the questions. Because the businesses that last aren't the ones with perfect foundations. They're the ones that understand what they're building on and why it matters. Some foundations fail because they were poorly built. Some fail because the ground shifted and they couldn't adapt. Some fail because winter came and they weren't ready. The businesses that last have foundations strong enough to anchor them, deep enough to weather storms, and flexible enough to reimagine how they stand when the world changes. It's never too late to do foundation work, but the longer you wait, the more you'll have to rebuild. I'm Jason Hager, and this is Grayleaf Media, the podcast for leaders who believe profit and purpose don't have to be at odds. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search Jason Hager or Grayleaf Media. Next week, building in public. The vulnerability of letting people watch you lay imperfect early bricks, and why transparency might be your greatest competitive advantage. Until then, keep building.